Away we go, everybody. All right, it's 1:30, and Steve made a meeting the day before Thanksgiving, so we all are aware that he's going to be docked at some point for this. But thank everybody for coming, and thank you for coming we're going to be meeting here until we notify you otherwise, because the new commission chambers aren't done yet, and so we apologize for that. And with that, we will begin the liquor control meeting for today. Agenda item number 1 is to approve the minutes of the October 17th, 2018 meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any changes or otherwise? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2A, application to issue a Class FA Entertainment Alcoholic Beverage License to Golf Addiction ND LLC, doing business as Golf Addiction, to be located at 4474 23rd Avenue South. Steve.
So currently, the Golf Addiction has a Class I entertainment license, which allows them to serve beer and wine, but they want to upgrade to the full alcohol. And they're expanding their location where they, actually have their entertainment side of things. They're adding more bays. One thing that is kind of interesting to note, they are planning on having an axe throwing bay or two. So that's kind of a different thing. They said it's been very popular down in Sioux Falls. So mixing alcohol with axe throwing sounds kind of interesting. But,
Yikes.
and this is a license that it's the combination is the food, but also we allow them the entertainment side of it too. So it's the same license that we have at the billiards. So.
And so they've had a previous license. Have they been good holders
Yes.
of their current license? Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't think we've ever had any issues there, have we, Chief, that you're aware of?
I don't know if there's any other things, Chief, as far as the background that you want to
Yeah,
talk
we,
about.
background on criminal history and credit history, we're completely clean, no issues there whatsoever. I talked to the applicant, they kind of told me what their plans were. They have a similar establishment down in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. There's been no issues down there with that establishment either. We talked about the axe throwing. They assured me they have a number of safeguards in place there, and I said, well, let's see how it goes, have some good insurance. But we really, as far as a liquor establishment, the license application have no issues.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Grant, do you have anything?
No
Yeah?
concerns from the health department.
Okay. Otherwise, I will accept a motion.
A motion approved.
And do we have a second?
I will second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And number 3 is the comments regarding the DCP event permit. And go ahead, Steve, if you want to start us out, and then if anybody wants to make comments, we'd love to have you come up.
Sure. So last meeting, we said that we should reach out to our licensees to see if there are any comments. And so I did receive a few comments. I included those in your packets. So the reason that we need to look at this is because when the license was originally created, it was created with a sunset provision. And so in order to go through our receive and file and first reading and second reading, we need to decide if we're going to move forward with this, if this is an event that the city of Fargo is embracing and it's being done properly. We did meet with Attorney Morris and reviewed the ordinance. We looked at every provision of the ordinance, and really there are just 2 areas that we would need to amend or change. One would be to eliminate that sunset provision, and then the other was on the ordinance, it calls for an application 45 days before, and we're suggesting that it's just notice of the event 45 days before. What we've learned through this process is that the events are fluid, and so to try to get that application in 45 days before it's just too onerous. We do like them to get, so the DCP applies and then the licensees apply too, so they're moving their individual licenses. And so we want those licenses in the 7 days before, like any other E permit. So that's kind of the background. I guess my observations or comments, I did attend last night, and I also attended at Street Fair and just kind of saw how things went. It was really a neat event to see last night. A lot of it was the openness that the McGowan guys, they were kind of like hosting. And they had I don't know if anybody else was there or not, but they had a warming tent, and then they had the pedestal warmers, the propane ones, and then they had 3 fire pits, and then 3 food vendors and 3 alcohol vendors. And so it just, the flow of everything, being able to visit with people, people were roasting s'mores. It was really a cool thing to see a lot of kids there, participating in the s'mores and that type of thing. So last night I thought was really good. I didn't stay real long because I got a little bit cold. So other things that I've seen, or that, I guess the things that kind of came to my mind, when you think of a DCP event like Street Fair, that was probably the most, that was the first event that we had. DCP receives a number of applications for the vendors to have their tents, and the same is similar with the liquor licenses. So, I think it's appropriate to choose a limited number of people that are going to be selling the alcohol, and then having DCP be the final contact as far as, who's watching and regulating and making sure that all of the safety provisions and safety features are in place. To put this on, DCP incurs a number of costs, a lot of security, additional police force. Last night I visited with the 2 officers that were on extra duty. They have to pay for that. Cups, wristbands, all those types of things. And so I know there were comments in the packet that talked about pay for play. And I don't really feel like it's that way. To me, it's about this control aspect and making sure that it's, the access to the alcohol is being controlled, where the alcohol is going is being controlled. I really think the last thing we would want is to just say, Katie, bar the doors, let anybody do whatever they want, and just have, selling mugs that people could then go to any bar and get filled up. I think then we've got an all-out pub crawl, and we're calling it a sponsored event. So those would be concerns that I would have. So I've dominated the conversation to point, so.
That's good. Chief, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if I could call some of my leadership team up to the podium. Lieutenant Chris Helmick oversees the downtown area and has worked with the DCP on this initiative, and I've asked him to prepare some data on the events that we had this year as compared to previous years, so that we can make an informed decision on our recommendation to the commission. Lieutenant Helmick, could you take the podium?
Good afternoon. Primarily what I looked at was the street fair, because that had the most information for us to digest, and that was the first event. There were a total of 4 events this year that included the public consumption of alcohol, the street fair being the first one, so that is primarily what I looked at. A couple of things that I looked at, I was really trying to figure out what kind of impact the changes in the ordinance had on police services and the number of calls that we had to deal with, any type of incidents that were tied to the event, and the number of citations that were written for public consumption of alcohol. What I did is I looked at last year's street fair call numbers. I also looked at the average number of calls that would occur on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday throughout the summer. And what I found for this year is that the number of calls for service that we had all 3 days actually dropped compared to last year when we had the street fair. When I looked at the average calls for service on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, the same trend. Looking at the calls for this year, the calls for service during the street fair 3 days were actually lower than a typical Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, which I thought was good. And then when I looked at the citation numbers for when officers write citations for consuming in public, I again looked at last year's street fair numbers, looked at this year's street fair numbers, and then looked at the average number of cites on a Thursday or Friday throughout the summer for both years. And again, this year, what we saw with street fair is we wrote 0 citations on Thursday or Friday, and we wrote 2 citations on Saturday. Now, I should note that those citations weren't necessarily due to the street fair. It could have just been because of normal activity downtown. And when I compared that to the average number of citations written Thursday, Friday, or Saturday throughout the summer this year, again, we dropped pretty significantly Thursday and Friday. Saturday was about average. As far as staffing went, we had 2 officers working throughout the day on all 3 days of the street fair. Started at 9 a.m. and going until 9 p.m. The alcohol service actually started at 11, but we had some extra patrols at that time. So we had the 2 extra detail officers throughout that entire time, plus we had our 2 downtown resource officers working during that time as well. In 2017, we had 1 officer working plus the 2 DROs, so we had just a slight increase in the manpower, and that was really just in anticipation of the ordinance change. Looking at street fair, there were some things that I thought were some key points that kind of contributed to what I thought was a successful event. First of all was the planning with the DCP. The DCP had a couple of meetings with us, and there was pretty continuous discussion between Melissa and I and her staff, as well as with Steve and with private security and the alcohol vendors that were going to be participating, so that was a big part of it. Also, the DCP put together their own liquor task force, and the goal of that task force was to go out and help educate and patrol to make sure that people were following the rules, and that seemed to be successful as well. Of course, having the DCP pay for the extra officers was good, because that contributes and deters any people that think they're going to get away with something. And then also doing some public education and news releases ahead of time, letting people know that, hey, this is a change in the ordinance, and here are the rules that go along with that, and just letting people know that they need to follow those rules. And then the last thing, which I think is really key too, is the DCP really had a desire to keep the street fair family friendly and not make alcohol a focus of the event. And again, it was just one more thing that you could buy along with the other food items that were there. When I looked at Corks and Canvas, there was 2 events on August 8th and October 11th. There was really nothing significant of note with either of those events. I know in October the event was pretty cold, so that had an effect, but it's a very different event from Street Fair, and we had 1 officer on patrol during that entire event from 5 to 9 on both those days, and there was nothing of note that occurred during those. And then the last event was last night with the Holiday Lights Parade, kind of last minute here, but I did talk to the officers that worked, and they said, again, there were no issues. Even with the number of people that were out there, they reported no citations, didn't really even have to talk to people about the rules. They kind of, what they said is most people just kind of stayed around that 2nd Avenue area where the tent was, and so there really wasn't any issues with people going outside the event boundaries. So all in all, I thought those 4 events went very well, and thought they were successful. So.
Lieutenant Helmick, are there any lessons learned that you think we can apply to if we continue to go on with this ordinance?
Well, I would tend to agree with what Steve said earlier. It's one of the things that I think helped was that we had a limited number of vendors that were participating. And, you know, for us, it's a lot easier to meet with 4 vendors and make sure that they're on the same page with the rules of the event, rather than having an open door policy, and that's just going to increase the amount of work that it's going to take for us to communicate with those and then patrol any issues that might come up. So I think that was a key point. You know, I think too that just like I said, the public education and kind of the approach that we took this year is, you know, not to be zero tolerance, but more of, you know, here's the rules, and if we did catch people outside the boundaries, just let them know, hey, this is a change and this is what we shouldn't be doing. But like Steve said, I think the control and keeping this relatively small and limited really helped contribute to the success.
How about signage? Was our signage adequate?
There was. The street fair was a lot easier because the streets were closed, and so you could put signs at various points. We did run into some challenges with Corks and Canvas. and to some extent at the parade too, because it's not very practical to put a sign in the middle of the sidewalk, and the streets aren't really closed off. And so that's something that I know we're going to talk to or work with Nancy on to maybe make some or propose some adjustments to the ordinance so that it's a little bit more flexible in that signing. But even so, we still made it work, and we came up with some different ways that we could still fulfill the ordinance requirements but yet still make it an effective tool to educate the public.
Thank you.
So can I ask you, if you don't mind, so are there any specific things you wish we would change as far as the ordinance or anything like that? Or do you think it's the way it is written out? And I know that's maybe a little bit out of your, but I don't know, just off the top of your head, is there anything that you think we could do to improve it?
Off the top of my head, no. I think, again, looking at the events, it really wasn't the way the ordinance was worded. It was more the planning that went into these events that contributed to the success.
Thank you very much. I guess one of my main concerns is, like we said, the DCP is doing it now, so we have a responsible party. I think that's critical for the future. However, we're going to have to have other people that are going to request the same type of thing. So we have to have something that's repeatable and explainable. Does that make sense to you? I think that's the challenge. I think now we have a track record of this system, but how do we make that repeatable? I guess that's my challenge. Okay, and now I'd like to open up for public comments too. Anybody else, especially the DCP, if you want to come up, but anybody else is welcome too. We'd love to have your comments, pro or con. So come on up if you wish to, and if you don't want to, that's okay too. And in the meantime, come on up if you want. But in the meantime, I do think that's our challenge. I mean, now we have something that works, but how do you make that consistent? And that's a challenge. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Travis Cook, and I'm the chairman of the board for the DCP. And, we just appreciate the opportunity to pilot this and to, I think the board has full confidence in Melissa and working with Steve and the whole team. I think Mr. Helmick said it very well that, she's set up many meetings to make sure that there is open communication, conversations, making sure that everybody understands what this is about. And so, I know you're going to be a part of this, potentially renewing this or continuing this. We feel that we are well positioned to be able to help with that, as well as feel that Melissa, we have the utmost confidence in Melissa and her ability to manage this properly for the city.
And I guess my question is, are there some things that you'd recommend that we change? Are there some things that we've learned that you think we should implement now? I guess that's, especially since we've had it for a couple of months to see how it works.
I think what we've really learned is that the community wants this, and it's added something new, and it's brought new people downtown, families downtown, people that didn't experience. I don't know how many conversations I had with people that said, this is the first time we've come to street fair, younger families, and a lot of times there were. The spouse was there, or someone, the whole family was there because, they also wanted to see what this was all about and to see what that experience looked like. As far as the ordinance is concerned, I don't know that there is anything that mechanically I think, or that we think should be changed. I think that, I think there are things that we probably can learn, like if we're seeing, potentially people leaving the boundary areas, maybe doing more education with the folks that are actually distributing the alcohol. I don't know, it's probably all communication from that standpoint, but mechanically, I don't see anything that needs to be changed with the ordinance.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
Melissa, are you ready? And so I guess that's my first, if you don't mind me, you can start, but that's my main question. There's some things that you think we should implement, and I've had lots of the retailers, a lot of them were looking at it going, wow, it was a very successful thing, and I think there's a lot more interest in it. And so my concern is that we make sure that it's replicable, but also how we can grow it and keep it successful.
Thank you. Melissa Rademacher with the DCP. Just a couple comments about the 4 events that we have delivered this year. It's about communication, the partnerships that we have done and built, and we've done a lot of testing. And I think one of the things that we learned that I think we could improve is communication in terms of the route and where you can actually walk around with an open container. Helmut mentioned that that is a challenge, and I think that's something that we should continue to test on the best vehicle and how to communicate that. We've included a checklist in terms of the pours and things like that and putting things in place to hold people accountable. But overall, it's about the experience and the positive experience. And our mission is to drive traffic and business to downtown. And these 4 events and the positivity that has come through all businesses of all sizes have been great. So we're open to learning more and testing and hopefully see it go forward.
And then maybe you're the wrong person to ask, but I think we're going to get pressure from other entities. Because I think you did a good job, and how can we make them follow what you've done? I guess and maybe that's our challenge, but do you get what I'm saying? Because I think you participated in having the officers, they paid for them and things like that. Is that something that we should have in the ordinance? I guess that's my question for you.
Yeah, I can't answer that, unfortunately, because there is a lot of work that is done before every single event. And when you plan these events, it's all about details and following through and communication and picking your partners. And the communication, the constant communication and the logistics meetings that we've had to make sure these events are executed, it all depends on, if you guys decide to open this up, if you're going to hold them accountable for those high standards, because I think that is the importance of making this successful and not a pub crawl.
To me, that's, I don't know if everybody else agrees with that, but that's the challenge, I think, so.
Well, and I think it's important to realize that, this, really what the DCP event permit allows is just the open containers, moving around. For anybody that's a retailer that has an event that they want to do, they can still get the e-permits, and they can still do it, within the defined boundary. The only thing is that they can't then take that beverage from their location to another one. That's really the only difference. And so, like Melissa said, the amount of planning to do this right, there's an incredible amount of planning and work that's involved, and to keep it so that it doesn't just become a pub crawl. And so that would be, like, my concern is that if we opened it up more, that we lose that control factor. And now you've got a problem, and you're saying, okay, who did it? Who's the vendor that sold the alcohol they shouldn't have, or who wasn't the eyes-on person, and that type of thing. So,
Go ahead. And if anybody else wants to come up, we'd love to have your comments. Go ahead.
Well, and it's important to note the process that was handled, with accepting the vendors, it was open to everybody.
Right.
And really the fee that needed to be paid was to offset the cost for security.
Right.
And so it was open to the entire city to be able to participate in these events. So I think that's a really important part of it. And so if someone didn't get in, it wasn't necessarily because maybe they didn't want to spend the money that we would need for security.
Come on up.
But also, it's
Sure.
important to note that as the board chair, we looked at the finances, and this was not a revenue producer for us. It really was that new experience, bringing more people downtown
Right.
to help all of the retailers as well as street fairs. So,
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a resident of downtown Fargo, and I guess I have some serious questions about what this is going to look like, what the language is like in this ordinance. So if this is all perceived as being a very successful event, and for successful events, what's stopping a vendor from coming and wanting to do this every weekend? Is that potential, that every weekend we're going to have people around town carrying drinks? And I understand the need to want to embrace the entertainment district that you're referring to, but I'm a resident downtown, and there are thousands of us who live down here, and this is our home. And I fail to see how this is going to be so family-friendly if this is, if the language isn't fine-tuned to accommodate those of us who live here and call it home.
And that's how the ordinance is written, is that it needs to be a DCP-sponsored event. And so things like the street fair, like Corks and Canvas, the Holiday Lights Parade last night, it's not an everyday, every weekend type of thing. It's not an everyday thing. There were, DCP was approached to be a partner in a different event, and things didn't work out, and so they didn't do that event. So they're being selective on which ones will work and which ones won't work, and they're very much aware that they have to be a good neighbor to the downtown residents.
And I appreciate your comments, and I do think we need to incorporate that in this because it's a legitimate concern. And so I appreciate you speaking up, because I think, but what we're going to have pressure on is someone else is going to come in and say, you allowed the DCP to do this. If you don't allow me to do it, I'm going to sue you. Do you know? And does this open a Pandora's box and basically say every weekend we can have something? So I do think your concerns are very valid, and so we'll make sure to incorporate that, because I think it's a very good point. So thank you. And the other thing is, I will challenge Melissa to make sure that we are in contact with, especially the downtown neighborhood, and how they have a group and things like that. I think that's very important to participate. So thank you very much for your points. Did you have another?
I just want to follow up on that. That is absolutely what we do not want to incorporate downtown. We want to protect the residents and businesses. We do not want this to be every day. And one of the events that Steve was mentioning, they wanted it to be similar to a pub crawl, and we did not feel good about that. We want to be 80-20 rule, and we want it family friendly, and it has to be a balance. So we have the same concern.
But it's very interesting. I mean, it was very successful and very well done. And so then you have people that are giving you ideas, and it very quickly could be very different. And so I do think we have to be on guard and protect what's done well and continue that and try to avoid. So here's my simple rule. I'm not that smart, as you all know. I try to repeat all the good, successful stuff and avoid the dumb stuff, and we managed to struggle along fairly well. So I just want to congratulate you. I think it went better than we could have hoped, and it's because of your hard work and preparation. And so I just want to thank you, because it's a great thing. But on the other side is what the things I'm trying to caution us about. We have to make sure that this is something that someone else isn't going to come in and say, I should be able to do this, and we end up doing it every weekend or every day, and it ruins the downtown. And so I think those are the things we have to be on guard for. And I apologize for hogging the microphone, but it's the day before Thanksgiving, and that's a new rule that they have. So, go ahead, Grant.
I think you already pointed out, Commissioner, but I think it's just really imperative that when we review the ordinance, we really spell and define the accountability parameters for the responsible party, plain and simple.
And so I guess that's my question, the steps forward. So to have this, have the city attorney make sure that these are written tightly, I guess that's my challenge. Maybe you can talk about that, Steve.
So Nancy was unavailable today, but I think that we'll take another look at it just to make sure some of those things that you're talking about, the accountability parameters, are in there, and move forward in order to get this so that the ordinance continues. We would probably move this to the city commission if you're ready for that.
And so I guess that's my question to our group here. So if we have, what I want to do is have the attorney make sure the wording is well done, but then to make sure the DCP and also the downtown neighborhoods and anyone else that wants to can see that before. What I'd like to do is have it come back to the liquor control. But we don't have time for that?
We have enough time. I mean,
I just, if I could just interject here, we spent quite a bit of time with the city attorney's office and the auditor's office and ourselves writing this ordinance in a really restrictive way, along with the DCP. And we wanted to be restrictive. It's a lot easier to start restrictive and then work through it and find ways where you can appropriately be more open than to go the other way, right wide open, then try to restrict it. And so I think this 6-7 month trial period that we've done, we've learned some things by doing it. There's some things that in practice that we're changing that make the ordinance work better. I'm fine with allowing this ordinance to continue as is. I'm not for, as some of these letters suggest, opening it up. I think then we're gonna see some things that we don't want to see downtown. I think having it a DCP regulated, scheduled event thing is the way to go. Keep in mind, we've only done this for 6 or 7 months. If we get through this next year and we find other ways that maybe it's appropriate to do things, I think there's nothing to prevent us next year from looking at this ordinance again and saying, here's what we want to change, or here's what we don't, or here's what we want to keep in place. We're still on the learning curve on this one.
You have any other comments? So from that comment, then basically you'd be in favor of basically removing the sunset out of it and just continue the ordinance as it is. But what I would like us to do is make sure that we go to the downtown neighborhood and make sure that they know the wording and how restrictive it is, whether it's Steve and us or the DCP, if we could make that happen, because I think that would be very beneficial to make sure, because I agree with them that they want to make sure this isn't happening on a weekend, every weekend basis. And so is that acceptable, or does that sound like a good plan to you? So at least you would be able to see the wording and go through it. Anyway, I think that's important. I hope that's okay. Does that make sense to everybody? I don't know if you're super happy about it, but I just think that as long as we're doing all we can to outreach to them, that's the best we can do.
I'd like to point out that we're a board that makes a recommendation, and it's the commission that actually decides what the action is to do here. With that in mind, I'd make a motion that we make a recommendation that we take off the sunset clause, go again next year.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? The discussion, or the further discussion I'll add is, so at our city commission meeting, then you're welcome to come out and make comments, either pro or con. Everybody's welcome for that. But I would say, I would encourage us to do this outreach, even if we can, before it comes to the city commission. And if nothing else, could we have this on the website so
Sure.
people can see the wording and see that?
So the only changes, again, that we're recommending is removing the sunset and then changing the 45-day application to 45-day notice, so that we know the event is coming and not have to have that application until 7 days before.
Correct.
But we certainly, our office can get this on the website, and then I have some emails of some of the Downtown Neighborhood Association, and I'll email a copy out to them.
Awesome.
Okay?
Very good. Any other further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Any other business, Steve?
That's it.
Well, I did the best I could. It's 2:04. Thank everybody for coming. I appreciate all your comments and for coming here. Happy Thanksgiving.